Nope. I don't hear anything in here. Yeah, they can hear me.
I hear a big echo.
Yeah. We can hear you, but only through my computer. So we're trying to fix it right now. All right. Nope. How about now? Nope, still can't hear anybody.
But you're coming through without an echo now.
Can't hear anybody, Mike. And we can hear the mic in here. So the mic is coming through here, but not the Zoom. The Zoom isn't coming through. The Zoom people aren't coming through. That's the problem. So we're going to figure this out and get this on.
We're here. Can you hear us? We're here.
All right.
All right.
We have almost everything. We can improvise if we have to. We'd rather not.
Who's there, Mike?
And I don't know, again, how did this happen since yesterday? Because yesterday it worked fine for our class. That's what we want to say.
Can you hear us, Rabbi?
Can't hear anybody else still.
Can you hear us? The Stallmans?
You should put your phone on the table. You just leave it. No.
Right.
No.
Well, started. We'll
Put it on the table.
we'll cut down on the. All right. So you're going to see me go away for a second, but Mike is going to figure this out. It's something with the computer. It's something with the computer at the temple. That's what's going on. So, but we can see you, we just can't hear you. What, Mike? You know, I hear you. All right. Okay, so we're going to get everybody on. Yeah, and as I said, the connection's good. It's just this is where we're going to start today. So we're at the last night of Passover. And tomorrow night, I mean, on the 8th day, technically, Passover ends. We're going to finish up with we're going to finish up Passover talking about Passover, at least one of the ways that it was kept during the biblical period. With a Pesach Sheni, with a second Passover, which you actually will still see on calendars. You'll see it on a Jewish calendar coming up. You'll see a Pesach Sheni, a second Passover, which, again, it's one of those holidays where people oftentimes say, what is that? What is a Pesach Sheni? Because it'll show up. I mean, if you look on your Hebrew calendar, it'll say April 5th, or excuse me, May 5th, starting April 4th to April 5th, it'll say Pesach Sheni on your Jewish calendar. If you have it, we're going to let some more people in. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to hear you on this computer now. Mike, don't worry about it, okay? It doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be coming through. So don't worry about it. So I'm going to mute my. That should be good. No, I'm still getting a little echo. All right. Oh, Mike, are you muting my sound in here? All right. Well, I'm going to do it through here then. Mike, don't worry about it. We're good now. Because I can hear everybody and you'll be able to hear them too. We'll just figure it out later. All right. So except we see that thing on the screen. That's all right. Yeah, so that's not good. That's not good. Oh. All right, now it's gone. Now the echo's gone. But you can hear me okay, right, everybody? Yes? Well,
Yes.
wait, they can hear. They can hear. Mike, they can hear. I'm just not coming through the synagogue. Yeah, it's fine. It's good. So, yeah, we're going to be reading from the first chapters of, well, not the very first chapters, but we're moving on a little bit in Numbers. And we're going to finally be getting to some of the action of Numbers, in the sense that so far they haven't moved the people. Now we're actually going to see them move a little bit. We're actually going to see them start the journey, because since all the way through Leviticus, all the way back to Exodus, basically since chapter 18 of Exodus, we've been at Mount Sinai. So we haven't moved really much, which if you think about it, means that for much of the Torah, through much of the 5 books of the Torah, we pointed out, at least during Exodus, we don't see a lot of places over the narrative. We leave Egypt, we get to Mount Sinai, and there's some stuff in between there, some stops there, the Red Sea, and a couple of battles, the Battle of Rephidim, and there's a little bit of description at the beginning of Exodus. And then we're going to have the next 20 or so chapters of Numbers. We're going to have some movement and action in different places, but we really don't get much in terms of chapters that are devoted to the journeys of the people. We really don't get much. And so that's an interesting, I guess, feature of the way the Torah depicts the Exodus and the time in the desert, the 40 years in the wilderness. There isn't that much that's actually reported on from the standpoint of what happens in the different places along the journey. So that's kind of a, if you will, that's one of the, I don't know, it's one of the features of kind of what happens in the 5 books. So where we left off, not last week, and again, we didn't have class last week because we were finishing up Passover. I'm just going to show you. There's our Passover Seder we had. It was a lot of fun, and it was really great to have. Well, we can't see it too much, but there we are. That was where we were last Thursday, and Wednesday night, a lot of people had their Seders. We had a really good start to Passover, and then the last 2 days, today and tomorrow, are technically Chag. They're holidays where we're not supposed to work, and we're supposed to enjoy some other days of rest. And so today we're going to take a look at Numbers, and as I said, we're going to look actually at Pesach Sheni. So kind of where we left off, we read this really long chapter 2 weeks ago, which talked about the sacrifices that the Israelites offered tribe by tribe, if you recall, and it went on for literally 90 or 89 verses, and it was repetitive, very repetitive. We went through, and after they go through all 12 tribes, they basically do a total of how many offerings there were, and that's the end. And then we actually get to this chapter, Behalotcha, which is a new portion. Chapter 8, it begins a new portion of the Torah, and it actually now talks about the lamps, the menorot, that was in originally the tabernacle, and then later on that was in the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, when King Solomon built it. There this beautiful candelabra, this beautiful menorah with 7 lamps. We read about it, the creation of it, in Exodus, when we went through the creation of the Mishkan, the items that are there. And then this week is actually kind of a little bit of a review of that, but specifically about how it was lit. And let's take a quick look at these first verses, these first 20 or so verses, which deal with the lighting of the menorah. And it says, and again, Behalotcha, which means when you rise up, when you go up. So this is actually Again, the third portion in the book of Numbers. And as it happens to be where we're starting tonight. So you'll see a couple of different chapters. Last week, it wasn't just about the sacrifice, or last week, 2 weeks ago, it wasn't just about the sacrifices that they did when they left. We also read about the Nazirite laws, and we also read about the Sotah laws, about the law of women accused of adultery. Today, we're also going to have some very different ideas. This first one is about the menorah. And we actually do read about this and think about it at Hanukkah, which is our holiday of thinking about the menorah, which is a recreation of this original light. So here we go. Still getting an echo from somewhere. Make sure we get rid of that. Okay. So Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you mount the lampstands, let the 7 lamps give you light at the front of the lampstand." Aaron did so. He mounted the lamps at the front of the lampstand as Adonai had commanded Moses. Now, this is how the lampstand was made. It was hammered work of gold, hammered from base to pedal, according to the pattern that Adonai had shown Moses. So was the lampstand made. So again, this is exactly what we read in Exodus, and it says it was made according to that pattern. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the Levites from among the Israelites and purify them. And this is what you shall do to purify them. Sprinkle on them water of purification, and let them go over their whole body with a razor, and wash their clothes. Thus they shall be purified." So you sprinkle water on them. It's a different than a full kind of immersion. Obviously, it's a sprinkling of water. And then they're shaved. And according to this, it's a whole body shave. It's a full shave. And their clothes are also washed. So those things are all done. Those all make sense, I guess. But this one now seems, you're going to see. Let them take a bull of the herd, and with it a meal offering of choice flour with oil mixed in. And you take a second bull of the herd for a sin offering. And you shall bring the Levites forward from the tent of meeting, assemble the Israelite community leadership, and bring the Levites forward before Adonai, and let the Israelites lay their hands upon the Levites. And let Aaron designate the Levites before Adonai as an elevation offering from the Israelites, that they perform the service of Adonai. So here it says that the Levites themselves are like an elevation offering. So they're almost like an offering themselves. They're performing the service of God. And it says that the people also lay their hands on them, which is very much, of course, kind of like, performing this rite of connection, which we've seen in other places that people do by laying their hands on somebody. And that's the word, vesamchu. Vesamchu. They put their hands, and yedehem, that's the hands, but samchu, that's laying or putting hands on or touching. In this case, the Israelites are doing that. The rest of the people are doing this. This ritual of smicha is important because the people are essentially designating through their touch and through their connection with the people, with the Levites, they're making them their representative. And they're passing that connection, that energy on to them. We actually perform this ritual today very rarely, but it is performed. As a matter of fact, 25 years ago, I had this ritual performed on me, because what rabbinical ordination is called in Hebrew, the word we use, we don't use the word, we do use the word ordination. I just used it, but it's not the Hebrew word for it. And it's not, it's the equivalent word. It's the word that we use for priesthood. but it's not the Hebrew word for it. The Hebrew word for it is smicha, which is laying the hands on of somebody. That's what we actually call it. We call it smicha from this word, from this action, from this ritual. So the rabbis who you designate or who were designated by the institution, they actually place their hands on you and give you the blessing. In this case, we do the Birkat Kohanim. Most seminaries do that, and they perform smicha on rabbis. That's what a rabbi is when they've been given ordination or clearance to be a rabbi, is they've been given smicha, which is this ritual. So that's what ordination is in Hebrew, or and that's where it comes from. So people will say, where did you get your smicha from? Where did you get your ordination from? What school? What rabbinical school? And we of course mean, it's like, where did you graduate from? Where were you ordained from? But really, it literally means, where did you have who laid their hands on you? Who placed their hands?
So Rabbi, did all your classmates put their hands on you?
No. So I had there were only two people that graduated rabbinical school with me when I graduated. There was 4 cantors and 2. And the only reason why, well, I remember that there was only 2, but the reason that I remember it is because they just gave me an award for 25 years of being ordained. That was what was in the paper, they released some press release for the people who graduated 25 years ago or were ordained 25 years ago. But no, it's actually now, it's the rabbis that you studied with. At our seminary, you could pick which teachers you wanted to do smicha, to perform that with you, and then sign your certificate. So I have a graduation diploma, which was signed by the rabbis that I chose, that I got to choose to do that. And then the dean and, the president of the seminary signed it too. But the 3 people that you designated as your smicha do that ritual of placing their hands on you when you get the blessing. So it's the rabbis that you study with that do it, not the other students. I would have been weird if the students had. I mean, they could have, but no, it's done by by your teachers, who are basically saying that we're passing this on to you.
It's very similar to when we see you. We do the ritual during a bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
Right. To me, it's very spiritual. It's very holy.
That's why we do it. I mean, I remember it. I had it done to me. There are some synagogues that don't do it exactly that way, but we do it. When Kenny used to, when he was with us, he would do it with me too. We both did it. But yeah, the ritual of laying your hands on the B'nai Mitzvah and giving them the blessing was something really holy. And sometimes they would kind of like hover over you and not exactly touch you. I don't know what maybe there's some kind of thing now where you're not supposed to touch somebody. I don't even know. I don't even want to go there, but it probably is. But yeah, look, I mean, it might get to a point where people say you can't touch someone to give you them a blessing. I don't know, whatever. I mean, but we had whenever I do it, I try to be in that moment and try to be as focused as I can be when I'm doing that, because to me it's one of the holiest things that I do, or one of the kind of the most, and I do that when I bless my kids. I mean, I don't do it as much because I don't spend Friday night dinner with my kids as much anymore, but yeah, if they were nearby, we would take turns. Tracy and I would, we would say the blessing over the kids individually. Each one of us, we would do, or one of us would, and we didn't, we had 3 kids, so we would, take a moment with each one. Maybe 2 would do, one would do 2 kids and one would do 1, but we did it every Shabbat. And Yeah, and when I do it in a synagogue setting, it's kind of a weird situation because it's a very private moment, but at the same time, we're doing it in front of other people. So it's kind of an uncomfortable thing. Kenny did something which was really smart, which I didn't ever feel really comfortable doing at first, but when he did it, I felt a little bit more comfortable with it. And I now tell the kids to do it. He would tell them to look down at their certificate when he gave them the blessing, probably because he didn't want them to look up and start smiling or laughing or something. I'm sure he had a reason for doing that. It was probably a good idea for the kids to kind of focus and not be embarrassed, for them to look down while they were getting the blessing. But I never really thought of that. But yeah, thanks for reminding me about when I do it. And there's been only a couple of times that I've been on smicha committees for rabbis when they finished up, but it's not because I don't teach or work at a seminary. I don't do that. And I've thought about it before, a couple of times people have asked if I wanted to teach, and I've taught maybe a couple sessions here and there, but I don't want to do it full time, at least not now at this stage of my life. But there is something special about, being able to pass something on to next generation of leaders. And actually one of my colleagues, like somebody my age and somebody who I've become friends with over the years, I was just talking to, just took over Academy for Jewish Religion here in California, Josh Hoffman, really nice guy. And he's now at AJR in LA, which actually, by the way, meets now, they have a campus that they meet on at LMU of all places. AJR used to be at UCLA, but now they have a bigger set up at LMU. First of all, it's really, really far away to go down there regularly. Like even he's not going regularly because during COVID, they were doing stuff all online. By the way, one of the rabbinical schools here in LA that's been here for years is the Ziegler School, of part of the conservative movement that used to meet up at AJU. AJU is in the process of being sold right now, by the way, and they've gone online. AJU is completely online now. I think they're completely online. So some of the rabbinical schools have taken away in-person meetings or reduced in-person meetings, which I really don't like, but I know why they do it, because they have students that come from for years come from all around to come, and a lot of them are working part-time or at a congregation, or they're living in other cities and they're coming in. Some of them have student pulpits in faraway places. But to do all your classes online seems kind of tough. But so there's no physical contact at all. There's no discussions in person, which I think are tough. It would make it a little easier for me to teach there. That's the only reason I'm saying it. But I don't know that I'd want to be in an environment like that where I'm teaching everyone remotely. But on the other hand, like I said, it's not something, at least at this stage of my life, that I want to teach. And if I did teach, it would probably be something like Bible or something that, that I could teach regularly, that I would bring something to. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with rabbinical schools in the future, because number one, they're almost all adding a huge virtual component. And number two, it's becoming more and more a situation where people that are going to rabbinical school, it's a second or third career for them. And they're not, when I went, I was, 3 years out of undergraduate. And the other person that finished with me was old enough to be my mother, and thank God she's still alive. But nowadays it's almost like, 2/3 of the people are it's a second or third career. So it is changing a lot. There's actually obviously too a lot more women that are being ordained than men, and there's more and more people that are being kind of like dual trained in both cantorial and rabbinic, so that they can be employed, because a lot of synagogues have cut back on their staff, and that they're looking for people who can do both. Because there's always been this kind of like, rivalry between, people that go to rabbinical school and cantorial school. And nowadays it's becoming more and more the case where people are doing on a dual track, or they're learning both skills. I think a lot of cantors today wish they had gotten smicha and could be rabbis too, because they're more likely to cut the rabbinic position, cantorial position, and not the rabbinic position. They'll keep the rabbi. And so a lot of times people are like, hey man, if I had been a rabbi, I wouldn't have lost my job, or I wouldn't have had my job cut back. So yeah, that's the smicha landscape today. But yeah, it's interesting. Something that we've been thinking, what is it going to be like the next generation of rabbinic folk? Anyways, so this is what what they did, and it says they laid their hands, and it says it says the Levites shall now lay their hands on the heads of the bulls. One offering shall be offered to Adonai as a sin offering, the other is a burnt offering to make the expiation for the Levites. So after the people put their hands on the Levites, then the Levites, and it's the same word, yismechu, they've put their hands on the bulls. And now the bulls are actually being offered. So it's almost like the people are offering up the Levites, and now the Levites are offering up the bulls. You shall place the Levites in attendance upon Aaron and his sons and designate them as an elevation offering to Adonai. Thus you shall set the Levites apart from the Israelites, and the Levites shall be mine. And you can really see here the focus on the Levites, not so much even the Kohanim, but the Levites. So you can see that there was, at least in the Torah, at least in the 5 books, an emphasis on the role that the Levites have. And it's important. I mean, this is not the Kohanim, these are the Levites. Thereafter, the Levites shall be qualified for the service of the tent of meeting once you have purified them and designated them as an elevation offering, for they are formally assigned to me from among the Israelites. I have taken them for myself in place of the first issue of the womb of all the male firstborn of the Israelites. For every male firstborn among the Israelites, human as well as beast, is mine. I consecrated them to myself at the time that I smote every male firstborn in the land of Egypt. Now I take the Levites instead of every first male born of the Israelites. And from among the Israelites, I formally assign the Levites to Aaron and his sons to perform the service of the Israelites in the tent of meeting, and to make expiation for the Israelites, so that no plague may afflict the Israelites for coming too near the sanctuary. So you can see what the role of the Levites is, and that it is in some ways connected to Passover, because it says, on the night of Passover, on the night when I passed over and I smote every first male born, remember in that time, we read about the fact that the firstborn is designated to God. And so the Levites essentially take the place of the Israelites who would have been killed that day. And so they're the firstborn, and they take the place of the firstborn of the Israelites. So they are God's. Again, as we talked about before, it could be that the Levites were the tribe or the group that actually came out of Egypt. There definitely is a connection here in the Bible, as we just read, to the Levites and to Passover and to Egypt, which is interesting. It's one of the things, as I said, the theory that the Levites were the tribe that came out of Egypt is bolstered by this chapter here, which talks about the Levites being the ones who are essentially like the people that would have been killed in Egypt. It's interesting. So we don't know that for a fact. It's a theory. It explains why maybe not all the Israelites were down in Egypt, but some of them were. It also explains maybe why the Levites don't have a tribal portion in the land of Israel, but are given the offerings and given the role of playing the priests and the at least the priests helpers here. Here it says that they help the Kohanim, they help Aaron and his sons, right? It's part of their job to help Aaron and the Kohanim. And so their job is also to make sure that nobody comes too close to the sanctuary, to the Mishkan. And as you can see, so that there are no plagues. Reminds us of the plagues in Egypt too. So there's some interesting connections here with the Levites, with Passover, with the temple, all of these things. It says Moses, Aaron, and the Israelite community leadership did with the Levites accordingly. So just as Adonai had commanded Moses in regard to the Israelites, to the Levites, so the Israelites did with them. And the Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes, and Aaron designated them as an elevation before offering before Adonai, and Aaron made expiation for them to purify them. Thereafter, the Levites were qualified to perform their service in the tent of meeting under Aaron and his sons, as Adonai had commanded Moses in regard to the Levites. So they did to them. And here's an interesting part of the work requirements and the work obligations. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, this is the rule for the Levites. From 25 years of age and up, they shall participate in the workforce for the service of the tent of meeting. But at the age of 50, they shall retire from the workforce and shall serve no more. They may assist their brother Levites at the tent of meeting by standing guard, but they shall perform no labor. Thus, you shall deal with the Levites in regard to their duties. And so you can see there is a retirement age for the Levites. There is a time when the Levites are done. So they don't start working until they're 25. And then they don't, and then they work for basically 25 years. They can still help out, but they're not allowed to do any labor. They're not allowed to do any work. They can stand guard. They can be essentially like the bouncers, but they can't do any of the work. They can't help out with any of the sacrifices. Again, later on, it seems like the Levites got to do absolutely nothing. But at least here, they are given the rights and the responsibilities of helping the Kohanim. Now, you can make the argument that when they're in the desert and then they're moving the sanctuary from place to place, there's more that they have to do. By the time they come into the land of Israel, there's less for them to do because the Kohanim can do the offerings. They don't need to move anything anymore. Part of the job, essentially, you can make the argument, which is the moving part, is done. They have a permanent structure and they don't need to move anywhere. And so once it was fixed, Levites are kind of out of a job because at least the work they did from moving is now not required. So that's possible. But again, it's also possible as the Kohanim multiplied, and there were enough Kohanim to do work, they didn't need the Levites anymore because the Levites were also multiplying and they didn't need to have these large groups of people employed in the temple service. They didn't need that many people. So this is probably, again, what's at stake here, what's happening here. But the Levites, at least here, seem pretty engaged, pretty important. In the book of Numbers, they're pretty important. Now, we change gears a little bit, though, as I said, it is a little connected in that it did mention Passover in the last chapter, but this chapter is about something in particular, which is what we call Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. And here's what it says. Adonai spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai on the first new moon of the second year following the Exodus from the land of Egypt. So now this is already the second year. This is not the first year after they left. The first year, they were leaving the land of, they were leaving Egypt, right? But now there's an important issue, which is you're supposed to do Passover every year. It says, let the Israelite people offer the Passover sacrifice at its set time. You shall offer it on the 14th day of the month at twilight. At its set time, you shall offer it in accordance with all its rules and its right. You know that. Passover is going to continue every year until today. We still do it in our own way. And it says, Moses instructed the Israelites to offer the Passover sacrifice. And they offered the Passover sacrifice in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, just as Adonai had commanded Moses, so the Israelites did. So that means that they were at Mount Sinai for basically a year. When people ask, how long were they there for? If they got to Mount Sinai, according to tradition, they got there about 2 months after they left. Around the time of Shavuot, the people were there to get the 10 Commandments. Well, if they're still here at Mount Sinai, when Passover comes along the second year, they're there for a year, just short of a year, 10 months. They're at Mount Sinai. And again, the 14th day of the month in the spring, which we just celebrated a week, 8 days ago, 7 days ago, a week ago, full moon, folks. It's a full moon. The night of Passover is a full moon. And so they sacrifice Passover. But it says right here, But there were some householders who were impure by reason of a corpse and could not offer the Passover sacrifice on that day. Appearing that same day before Moses and Aaron, those householders said to them, impure though we are by reason of a corpse, why must we be debarred from presenting Adonai's offering at its set time with the rest of the Israelites? We can't do the Passover sacrifice. What do we do, Moses? And so here we have a story in the Torah about laws that are created based on this situation, based on a case, based on again, God didn't give us a rule here. The people come to Moses and say, what do I do? Can't celebrate Passover. Moses said to them, stand by. Let me hear what instructions Adonai gives about you. So Adonai spoke to Moses saying, and this will not be the only time that God has to weigh in on a decision in the Torah, but it's still the Torah, so God can do this. God can give us a decision, which essentially becomes, well, it's part of the Torah, right? Speak to the Israelite people, saying, when any party, whether you or your posterity, who is defiled by a corpse or is on a long journey, would offer a Passover sacrifice to Adonai, they shall offer it in the second month on the 14th day of the month at twilight. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall not leave any of it over until morning. They shall not break a bone of it. They shall offer it in strict accord to the law of the Passover sacrifice. Everything that we read about at the first Passover in Egypt, eating it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, not breaking bones of it. You do it in the second month. You wait a month. And that's why calendars, even to this day, say Pesach Sheni. Now, it's the night of April 4th, but it'll May 4th, sorry, but it'll say May 5th. In your Jewish calendar, it'll say Pesach Sheni. Now, we don't offer a Passover sacrifice anymore. So people will say, well, why do we have to do a Pesach Sheni? Well, there could be a situation where you couldn't celebrate a Passover Seder. You were out of town. You were out fighting on a battle. Our good friend Harvey Kale is not with us tonight because he's on the Majestic Princess at the international date line. The poor guy's going to be in Tahiti tomorrow or today. It's a rough life. So he said, I can't be there with you tonight. I said, it's okay, Harvey. It's don't make me feel worse. But yeah, he's in Tahiti. He's on Tahiti. But he got to celebrate Passover on the cruise. You know why? Because they set up a Passover Seder for the people. He said there were like 30 people on the cruise and they all got to celebrate Passover together. He said it was great. He says Princess took great care of them and helped them with a Passover Seder.
My folks.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a rabbi. And so my dad.
What? So sometimes they used to actually hire rabbis, and they actually would ask me every year to go on a Passover cruise, and I never do it. And I don't want to be on a Passover cruise. I don't. No, I know, but it wasn't a Passover cruise. It was a cruise during Passover, and they would give you the itineraries, and they say these are the ones that have. Here, I'll see if I can show it to you. It's been years, but yeah, there were companies that would do it, and you had to pay. You had to pay for your spouse, but you got a free cruise. And when they would get really, really desperate, they would actually even in some cases pay for your airfare. Interesting, right? But I'll see if I can open one of these ones up. That's awesome. Yeah, people would get their people would go on these cruises. Let's see if I have one of the. Oh yeah, I think I do. Wait a second. Yeah.
Rabbi, what does the dead body have to do with it?
So when you would come in contact with someone who is dead, the Torah says you're not allowed to have Passover with unless you're pure, unless the person had been pure, right? So what happens is that a person has to go through purification, but because it requires a full day of someone going through purification, there's no way that they could be at Passover. part of the purification is washing yourself and but then there's also this issue of time. You can't you can't get around the time. So you had to do it. So there's also, as it said, the situation of people being of traveling. Here, I'll show you this one. I'm going to show you this one. This was a sample. They would give you this was what it said. It was they pay for your cruise and your gratuities. You'll be responsible for. There's $100 admission fee. Yeah, this was Royal Caribbean. So there you'd get it. You'd get they would take care of your. Yeah. You had to do Friday night, evening Shabbat service, and Passover Seder. Huh. So that was a while ago. I mean, that was 12 years ago, but I never did it. And I told my wife, I'm never going to do it. Because the reality is, if I'm on a cruise, I'm on the cruise at least partly to eat. And if I'm going on a cruise and I can't eat pizza, I can't eat pizza at 12 o'clock, well, I'm on the cruise, man. So good food. I'm gonna go on a cruise and eat a bunch of fruit. So I say no. But I also, look, I love having our community seders, and I done the community seder here now for 25 years. I'm not gonna, I'm not at a point yet where I want to stop doing the and I love spending Passover with my family, but it's also the food. I'll say that's a good part of it. So Pesach Sheni would work for somebody who's on a cruise or in a place where they couldn't celebrate Passover. What?
8 days.
So it's 7 days in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Right. So in the Bible, it's 7 days. So
Is it 7 days then? Because when I looked at my calendar, it only shows it one day.
yeah, so it's not a 7 day. Pesach Sheni does not go on for 7 days. You only observe the first night. Let me explain. You only do a Seder the first night, which is obviously, we do usually 2 nights of Seder, but it allows somebody to have the Passover meal, because the matzah issue, they recognize you're not going to find it easy to have matzah when no one else is having matzah, no one else is making matzah, but you are supposed to eat the matzah with bitter herbs for that night. Now, what's interesting about this, though, so again, Israel has 7 days of Passover. The diaspora traditionally has 8 days. The Reform movement went back, and said you only have to do 7 days because, we're following it based on the biblical law. I always found that confusing. But Harvey hit me with a tough one. Harvey hit me with this one, which is why I'm a rabbi, right? Because I get asked these tough questions. So he says to me, because I just told you he's in Tahiti, says to me, and this is a perfect, see, look, this is perfect. We're reading about Pesach Sheni. And so he hits me with this. He says, first of all, hi to the Wednesday night class. Hi, on behalf of him. We're going to be back. They'll be back in May. And he maybe will watch this. He says, saw on Facebook that he had a successful second night Seder. He wrote, on our way to Tahiti. And he said, so he said, wait, where was his question? Oh, here's what he said. I understand Passover is 8 days. Not an issue, except not being able to eat at all the luscious food on board. There you go. That's my point. How do you count for 8 days? I mentioned this because yesterday we crossed the international date line, and today is our second day of April 11th, 2023. So for us, Passover technically is over Wednesday night. Is it 8 days, or is Thursday night 9 days? So that's a rabbinical question. I'm faced with these questions regularly. No, I'm not regularly, but that's an interesting question. It's a Pesach Sheni type question. So here's what I told him. I thought about this. Technically, if you normally do Passover for 8 days, you count 8 days from when you began. That is 8 24-hour periods since the first night of April 5th. So no matter how many times you cross the date line, still be 8 days. But it is an interesting question because there is that question, and people have asked it since we've had airline travel. If you started Passover, let's say in America, and then go to Israel where it's 7 days, do you keep it for 7 days once you land in Israel, or do you keep it for 8 days? Because technically you're in Israel now. So it's a dilemma because you can follow what it is in Israel because you're in Israel now. And so most of the rabbinic authorities say you if you started at 8 days, you keep it at 8 days. But it is an interesting question of how long is the holiday if you're crossing time zones. And to me, the Torah says you do this. Well, the Torah says you do it for 7 days, but you do you are having the Passover holiday is for you. It's not for where you live, or it's not contingent on where you live. It's contingent on you. So to me, it's wherever you are is where Passover, where Passover is. This was this argument or discussion about eating Ashkenazi Jews eating rice and beans, which the argument was, well, the argument some people made is that Jews who don't live in Ashkenazi countries anymore, why are they following a tradition of not eating rice and beans when Sephardic Jews could eat that? Isn't America was originally settled by Sephardic Jews? Is it Sephardic or Ashkenazi? And my argument was always, yeah, but you're an Ashkenazi Jew. You didn't become a Sephardic Jew because you live in America, in the New World. But the conservative movement eventually came up 10 years ago with the answer that, look, the reality is that the diet that we have today, the way that we eat, is much closer to the Sephardic diet than the Ashkenazi diet necessarily was. And kitniot, those things like rice and beans and corn, were not specifically mentioned in the Torah as forbidden types of grains. So it took us a couple of years, but now now we're eating rice and beans, and it still feels a little weird, but it does give us a little bit more to eat, to try, but not enough to go on a cruise. Sorry.
Back to your statement about going to Israel.
Yeah.
Because my feeling on that, I understand what you're saying. If it's you go 8 days. But however, when you're in Israel, it is only a 7-day holiday.
I would say yes, if you spent the whole time there. And there are people who do, by the way. I was going to say that. There are people who go to Israel. Mike said, well, what if you're in Israel? Yeah. There are people who go to Israel for the entire Passover holiday now, and they do follow it. They say, hey, look, I want to. Yep. And I've never done that. As I said, I've never been in Israel for Passover. It kind of be cool, but it's very expensive to go there during Passover. And they're, oh no, if they're there for Passover, yeah. Look, it's an expensive to go there for all the holidays, because a lot of people go there for holidays. And so if you go there for Yontif, you go there for Sukkot, holidays, Sukkot, it's very expensive. Hanukkah, not so much, because Hanukkah is not like, as big of a deal there. And it's also the winter time, and, it could rain and the weather's not as good. But the fall and winter, fall and spring holidays by far are more expensive to be there for. And it is kind of like a statement of wealth to be there for the holidays. And yeah, if I was there for the holidays, by the way, one of the reasons that people go overseas and go on usually kosher cruises, if they're kosher, if they're really kosher, one of the reasons they do that is they don't have to change their house over. If you're not in your house during Passover, you don't have to flip your house over. So there are a lot of Orthodox Jews now that leave during Passover and get out of town. There was, as I said many times, there was a Passover. I don't know if they did it this year at the Hyatt,
But there was a Passover Seder for years, a Passover week at the Hyatt, and the whole hotel got taken over by Orthodox Jews, primarily from Hancock Park, that would come out to out from LA, come out here with their families and live out here for a week during Passover, 8 days. They would check into the Hyatt and they'd be there the whole time. And they had kosher. They turned the kitchen kosher, because kitchen's never kosher there at Hyatt. They turned it kosher for a week, and they had the Hyatt paid for people to be on staff there. They turned all the elevators into Shabbos elevators for the holidays and for Shabbos, so that they wouldn't have to press a button. And they had people stationed on every floor to open the doors for the people, so they didn't even have to carry a key. Yeah. So that's how much money the Hyatt was making on that Passover situation. So I don't know if it's stopped during COVID, but I do know that up through 2019, it was still going on. And we would see the people out here, and they would go out to on Chol HaMoed on the in between days, like yesterday and day before. Even to this morning was Chol HaMoed. They would go to Magic Mountain and they would do activities and stuff. They'd go to the mall. But on the Chag and on the the first 2 and last 2 days on Shabbos, they'd be in the hotel. They'd hang around the hotel. They'd have a synagogue. They'd open up in the ballroom, and the whole thing was turned over, and they filled it up year after year. I mean, I never asked them how much they spent on it, but I know they were charging like $4,000 or $5,000 a person for that experience. And some of the people would the guys were sometimes working in the city and would stay overnight here and then go on Chol HaMoed, would go into the city to work, but they didn't have to turn their houses over. And for the women, especially if they have money, that's worth money. Not having to flip your house over and clean the whole place up and switch over the dishes. For some people who have enough money, $20,000, $30,000, they are like, that's a bargain. I don't have to flip my house over. So that's part of what calculation was for people. Passover travel was pretty big up through the pandemic. I don't know if it's rebounded. Just so you know, by the way, I had a conversation with my buddy at Ralph's, because I was complaining to him about how poor the Passover stockages were.
That's not true. The one over on
Where?
McBean.
And Decorah? No, Decorah and Big Bean. Because I went there last week.
No, it's not. It's on the back side, but it's nice.
Backside?
Yeah.
Because I saw an end cap that was
It was an
nothing.
end cap at the end. We were there. Saturday when we came back to vacation.
Maybe they restocked it.
Maybe.
I don't know, but
And it's also not very nice. Filter fish is Costco.
yeah, I heard that. But I asked my buddy at Ralph's, because I had a few complaints, and our Ralph's had nothing. The one at Stevenson Ranch had nothing. So I wrote to him, people are complaining there's not a lot of product this year. Is there stores where there's more of it? Or did you just not have enough this year? And he says low sales so far. And he told me the Decorah one was the one that they put everything, I mean, not everything, but that's the one that they stocked, the one up by you guys. One up by you guys, Stolman's, they said that was their Passover. But I went there last week, I think Monday or Tuesday. I went there before the holiday, and I was really disappointed with the
Gloria said she just saw it the other day.
I was there yesterday and saw an end cap at the very back of the store, but I was there before Passover. This is totally separate, but tried to get a brisket. And he said, we're not carrying it this year. So I was like, don't you know it's Passover? A lot of people want to have brisket for Passover. Because I know they're not having it. And I said, okay.
Well, we had Danny Kaplan works at our
Right.
the butcher shop, and he said people were coming in and asking for shank bones, and they told people they weren't giving them out this year. They didn't stock them up. So I can only tell you, I'm not real happy with what Ralph's did. So I asked him today, I said, did you find out what happened? And he said Passover only items had a 70% sell through. And I said, is that average? He said last year was over 85%. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there seems to be a little bit of disconnect between what people want, what people got, and how they're stocking stuff, because well, I was kind of annoyed with him anyways. Vaughn's was horrible.
We went to Albertsons.
Yeah, but Ralph's owns the Albertsons though.
I get,
I thought it's part of it.
I get.
All I know is that our big news is that Albertsons, the old Albertsons location in Westridge is becoming a Trader Joe's.
Is it
So
really?
we're very happy about it. And you're getting one over on your side of town too.
Where?
There's gonna be one, I know, but you're gonna get one closer. It's on the Canyon Countryside.
There's gonna be a Trader Joe's over there?
Yeah, there's gonna be two more. There's one on Canyon Countryside and the one that where the Albertsons, where the Westridge, which has been empty for years, is gonna be Trader Joe's, which is huge.
No kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so we're very excited about that. What? Yom HaShoah. So we're talking about Yom HaShoah. It's a very interesting question. So Yom HaShoah is coming up. Yom HaShoah, as we said, is connected to Passover. And the reason is Yom HaShoah. Oh yeah, the Israeli government instituted Yom HaShoah. That's the first holiday. Well, technically Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, was instituted by the government too. But the first worldwide Jewish holiday that was instituted by Israel was Yom HaShoah. It was instituted in, I think, 1953 or 63. They instituted Yom HaShoah, but it's not called the Holocaust Day. It's called Yom HaShoah. Exactly. International Holocaust Day is the United Nations instituted that. In Israel, they instituted what's called Yom HaShoah Ugvura, the day of remembering the destruction, the Holocaust, and Gvura, and resistance. And so the holiday was started by survivors who lived in Israel who wanted not only to remember destruction, but actually the act of the acts of resistance. And so they wanted it as close to Passover as possible. The rabbinic authorities didn't want it at all during Passover, but the argument that the survivors had is that the greatest act of survival or resistance during the Holocaust was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which started on Passover in 1943. April 18th, 1943 was the night that the Jews of Warsaw started fighting back against the Nazis, as they knew the liquidation was imminent for the whole ghetto. So the Ghetto Uprising started April 18th, 1943, almost exactly 80 years ago from today. And so the Israeli government wanted to remember also resistance, not just, and again, that tells you a little bit of the mentality of Israel, which is we're not going to just focus on the death and destruction, but actually acts of resistance, which to some extent, Israel in itself is an act of resistance. So Israel did that. And so the compromise was making it the 27th of Nisan, which is basically 2 weeks after the night of Passover. So like 2 weeks after Passover starts is when we have Holocaust Remembrance Day. So this year, what I'm working on, and I don't have the date yet, is we're going to do a visit out to the Reagan Library, the Auschwitz exhibit. Yeah. So we're working on that. We're trying to get a date and a price that's going to be good for everybody to go. And the exhibit at the Reagan Library, and we're going to work on transportation. We're going to get that together. That is the exhibit was curated by Michael Berenbaum, who we've done a lot of work with JLTV. He's a professor of specifically teaches the Holocaust at AJU, but he was the curator for the exhibit. And so I'm trying to also maybe get a day where he can talk a little bit about why he picked the things that he did. I know that it actually has quite a lot of items from Auschwitz. I forget how many actual physical items they have. And some of these items they've never let them off of the grounds of Auschwitz before. So, it's actually got, items there from Auschwitz as the Stolmans know, we went to Auschwitz back about 7 years ago. We went as a temple group to Eastern Europe, and we finished our trip at Auschwitz, which is, it's one of those places that, becomes synonymous with the Holocaust and with, the worst chapter of humanity. So it just so happens that that's going on. We were going to try to do it for this weekend, but we can't, the 16th, but we are going to get it on quick. And we're going to have some stuff that we're going to obviously be showing that night on our Facebook channel. But yeah, we're trying to do that exhibit as a way to reflect on the Holocaust. And you know, our job is to keep these stories alive. You know, we had Margot came to our Seder at on Wednesday night at our house, and you know, had her share some of the stories of her last Passover Seder in Berlin in 1938, and what it was like to she said the night of Passover, when they opened the door for Elijah, they had somebody, you know, they set it up so somebody would knock on the door, and she got petrified. She thought it was somebody coming to take the family away. So I thought about, she told that story. I never heard her tell that story before. Turned out they told her to go get the door, and she was freaked out. She was like, I'm not going to open the door. And somebody had left her, her grandfather had left her a doll in the front, on the front step, for Passover, but she was so scared that she wouldn't go out. She didn't do it. I think they finally, I can't remember what she said. I was crying. She basically, you know, she was a 11-year-old, 10-year-old girl, 11-year-old girl, you know, she went out, or somebody went out and got it for her and brought her the doll. But
What year was that?
1938,
Oh, wow.
4 or 5 years after the Nazis came to power. But she had already had a night where her grandparent or grandfather got taken away on, you know, for questioning, and was beaten up. You know, he's probably in his 50s or 60s. He got taken away and was gone for a couple of days and came back all beaten up. And her grandfather was a pretty wealthy and pretty powerful guy, and she remembered that, and so she said that she was scared to open the door. I can't blame her. I don't know that I would have been comfortable opening a door in those days, not knowing who was going to be on the other side, or if that was going to be the last time I'd see my family. Yeah, and not long after that, they escaped and they came to America, but that was her last Passover in Germany. It was also one of the last holidays she had with her grandfather.
She was lucky the doors closed pretty quick after that.
Yeah. Well, her story, like a lot of people's stories, is even crazier because her grandparents were actually the ones who got the visa, and they gave it to her parents and to her, and her grandparents never made it out. Her one set of grandparents was murdered at Buchenwald, and the other grandmother had died already, and then the grandfather committed suicide rather than get taken away.
Right.
So yeah, she lost all her grandparents by the time the war was over. All her relatives were gone. She was an only child, so she didn't have any other brothers or sisters, but they were wealthy enough to get out, and they were wealthy enough to get visas, but they couldn't get everybody out, and they lost everything. They lost millions of dollars worth of property and stuff there. So her story is pretty wild, and also, again, not that unusual. Francine Van Scoyoc has a story about her. Her father got out, and they lost everything in Austria. We have people in our temple who are lucky to be here, and Margot just happens to be one of the people who was there actually herself. A lot of people are second generation survivors who have a lot of trauma themselves passed on to them. People who never got to know their grandparents, but also their parents were never quite the same after living through that as teenagers. So
was that Eddie Hirsch's folks too?
Eddie Hirsch's folks were survivors of concentration camp. Eddie Hirsch's mom, Mina, was in Auschwitz,
Yeah.
but she survived, and she actually went out and was in work camps and and survived. But she was the only one of her family that survived. She had two sisters, older sister and younger sister, that both died, and her parents were I mean, not died. They were killed. They were murdered. So she's the only one of the five people in her family that survived. And I can't remember Eddie's dad's story, but I didn't know him. He had passed away before we met. But Mina, who passed away just a few months ago, survived a few camps, including Auschwitz. But they went back with her. They took her around. Yeah, it was pretty weird to think about the fact that in the camps, people still found a way to celebrate Passover, by the way. You read those stories of people who tried to create a Passover experience while they were as slaves. I mean, I don't know. I can't even imagine. I mean, I can, but it's just almost it is surreal, like that people lived through that and actually celebrated Passover in those moments. All right. So but one of the things it says about this is that if a party who is pure and not on a journey refrains from offering the Passover sacrifice, that person shall be cut off from his kin, for Adonai's offering was not presented at its set time, that party shall bear the guilt. So Passover Sheni is not a way to get out of celebrating Passover the first time. If you could have and didn't do it, it's on you. All right. So don't say that, I'll just do it later. I'll do it next month. It's not for you. That's only for people who really couldn't do it. When a stranger who resides with you would offer a Passover sacrifice on a night, it must be offered in accordance with the rules and rites of the Passover sacrifice. There shall be one law for you, whether stranger or citizen of the country. So it's interesting that the people who reside amongst you are also supposed to offer and be part of the Passover offering, which is weird because normally people don't take part in sacrifices who are not Jewish or not Israelite, but the people who reside amongst you are supposed to do it too. On that day that the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the pact, and in the evening it rested over the tabernacle in the likeness of fire until morning. So that's the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. So it seems, again, real important about the journey that from that moment on was always so. The cloud covered it, appearing as fire by night. And whenever the cloud lifted from the tent, the Israelites would set out accordingly. And at the spot where the cloud settled, there the Israelites would camp. And we heard this earlier. I mean, this isn't the first time we've heard about this. We heard about it at Exodus. But now they're finally taking off. And it says, at a command of Adonai, the Israelites broke camp. And at a command of Adonai, they made camp. And they remained in camp as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle. So they knew when they were supposed to go. They were led by the cloud. When the cloud lingered over the tabernacle many days, the Israelites observed Adonai's mandate and did not journey on. And at such times as the cloud rested over the tabernacle for but a few days, they remained encamped at a command of Adonai and broke camp at a command of Adonai. And at such time as the cloud stayed from evening until morning, they broke camp as soon as the cloud lifted in the morning. Day or night, whenever the cloud lifted, they would break camp. And so it says that no matter what time of day it was, they would break camp, they would follow it. Whether it was 2 days or a month or a year, however long the cloud lingered over the tabernacle, the Israelites remained encamped and did not set out. Only when it lifted did they break camp. On a sign from Adonai, they made camp, and on a sign from Adonai, they broke camp. They observed Adonai's mandate and Adonai's bidding through Moses. And so that is the law of how they were going to move, which was by God's command. So that's chapter 9. Now, this next chapter, chapter 10, is also, by the way, kind of connected, obviously, to the journey, but it is also, well, you'll see. You'll take a look. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, have 2 silver trumpets made, make them of hammered work. They shall serve you to summon military bodies of the community. And that, again, it doesn't say military bodies, but again, based on the context here, this is to set the divisions in motion. And so this kind of tells us that, again, the way that the tribes were broken up into 4 groups of 3 tribes, that this is how they're going to start going off. Here's what happens. When both are blown in, when both trumpets are blown in long blasts, the whole company of fighters shall assemble before you at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And if only one is blown, the chieftains, the head of Israel's contingents, shall assemble before you. But when you sound short blasts, the divisions encamped on the east shall move forward. So you can see they're starting to give you the signals for how people will move when they are assembling. And it seems, again, this is more in a military context. So how are they going to go? They're going to hear two blasts. Everyone, all the fighters are going to come out. If you hear one blast, only one of the shofar, or actually they're not shofars. These are trumpets. They're a little different. That only the chiefs come out, and it says right here, when short blasts, only short blasts, the divisions on the east shall move forward. And when you hear short blasts a second time, those encamped on the south shall move forward. Those short blasts shall be blown for setting them in motion. So you can see that these are short blasts, and the word we use for that is a truah, which is the word that we still use for the sounds of the short staccato blasts that we hear in the sound of the shofar. So we have a tekiah, which is a blast. That's just one long blast. And that's a tekiah. That's the sound that it says right here. The tak'u bahen, when they blow a long blast, and here it says, meaning of Hebrew uncertain, because the word taka, I'm not sure what the root or the origin of that word is. And then it'll say right here, teruah, also uncertain how we get that word teruah. For us, we also have the shavarim, which is the middle blasts. All right, those are middle blasts, but those are the sounds we hear at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We'll hear sounds of the shofar, but here it's clearly to call us into battle. So two horns together means something. One horn by itself means something. Short blasts means something. And then it says right here, let me just read these. While to convoke military bodies of the congregation, you shall blow long blasts, not short ones. Again, those are the tekiah. Trumpets shall be blown by Aaron's sons, the priests. They shall be for you an institution for all time throughout the ages. When you are at war in your land against an aggressor who attacks you, you shall sound short blasts on the trumpets, that you may be remembered before God Adonai and be delivered from your enemies. Now, when you go to war in your land, you're going to blow these trumpets, and we're going to know. Now, how do we know that this is different than a shofar? Because it uses the words hatzotzrot. These are the trumpets. So they're made out of metal. If they're made out of metal, they're a trumpet. They're not a shofar. They're not made out of a ram's horn. It'll say a shofar. Here it's trumpet. So they had different sounds. They had a trumpet sound, and then they also had a shofar sound, which they use for certain things too. But this says specifically a trumpet. Has a different sound. Has a brassier sound. And these are for going into battle. So people used to use trumpets in battle up until literally the First World War, until people started getting into tanks and started getting into machinery where they couldn't hear the sounds. Those sounds were critical in telling people how to line up and how to go into battle. So this is not anything different than what people were doing up until literally 100 years ago. Blowing a horn, and the buglers in a battle were critical parts of keeping your formations and keeping your ability to go to war in a way that's going to keep people alive. I mean, they literally were critical for the tactics that you were going to employ, and having a chance to win a battle. If the buglers were knocked out, then how do you even know what are your next steps? Who's going into battle next? Who you sending in next? Cavalry, sending in infantry, or you sending in, let your arrows go, your archers shoot. You had to have that. So this was really not any different up until recently, this was the way people would communicate in battle. Now, it's also good to know that on your joyous occasions, your fixed festivals, and on your new moon days, you shall sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and your sacrifices of well-being. They shall be a reminder of you before your God. I, Adonai, am your God. So there's also the holiday aspect of it, which is good things. These are joyous occasions and fixed festivals, but good times you're going to hear the sounds too. In the second year, on the 12th day of the second month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle of the pact, and the Israelites set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sinai. The cloud came to rest in the wilderness of Paran. When the march was to begin, at Adonai's command through Moses, the first standard to set out, troop by troop, was the division of Judah. In command of its troops was Nachshon, son of Aminadab. So the first division that went out was the Judah division, the first group led by Nachshon, the leader of Judah. And so this is what it says. The first group is going out. Judah goes out in command of the tribal troop of Issachar, Netanel, son of Tuar, and in command of the tribal troop of Zebulun, Eliav, son of Chalon. So the first group that goes out, the first quarter of them, the first three tribes, are the tribe of Judah, led by the tribe of Judah, which of course makes sense. They're the largest tribe and later on the most powerful tribe of King David. And so they're the first ones that take off on our journey, now from Sinai to the wilderness of Paran. Now, just to show you again quickly on a map, what we're talking about here, on a map of the desert, is that they're moving from the Sinai up. They're moving from, let me show you. We're moving from the Sinai. This is the Sinai. You can see it says Sinai Peninsula. If you look out, that's, part of Egypt now, Sinai. And they're going up here to what we call the wilderness of Paran, which is right here. So you can see this is where Mitzpeh Ramon is, the Ramon crater, right here. And this is the wilderness still. We call it the Negev Desert. And it's the southern part of Israel. And in those days, again, it was crossing over from Egypt. Even in those days, it was crossing over from Egypt into the promised land. So even in the days of Moses, this area was considered part of Egypt. The area of what was the border was probably about here, a little bit closer to a little bit into Egypt today, but right from here, from about Arish down, that would have been the border of it. Today, again, this area here, the Gaza Strip, is the part of Israel that is still again inhabited by the Palestinians, but this area here below would be where they were coming in through the desert into here. So that is where they're going to. It's basically taking them into the land. We're going to be in the land really soon. But again, not along the coast, because it says that God didn't take us along the coast through the Philistine areas, because that area that's today inhabited by the Palestinians was in those days inhabited by the Philistines. So here we go. The first group is those first tribes. Then the tabernacle would be taken apart, and the Gershonites and the Merarites who carried the tabernacle would set out. The next standard to set out, troop by troop, was the division of Reuben. In command of its troop was Elizur, son of Shedeur. In command of the tribal troop of Shimon, Shalumiel, son of Zurishaddai, again. In command of the troop of Gad, Eliasaph, son of Deuel. And that is, again, the second group, the second division, the second group of 3 tribes. So now we have 6 tribes that are on their move, on the move. And now the Kohathites, the ones who carry the sacred objects, would set out. And by the time they arrived, the tabernacle would be set up again. So that it was, we said, the Gershonites and the Merarites were in charge of setting up the frame and then the drapes and the tabernacle itself, the tent. And then what would happen? Once it was all set up, then the Kohathites could come in with the ark, the menorah, all those great things that would go inside, the altar, the incense, they'd all bring that stuff in. So they would come out. Now, we have half the tribes, and basically now all the Levites are now on their way. Well, all the Levites. The next standard to come out, troop by troop, was the division of Ephraim. In command of its troop was Elishama, son of Amihud. In command of the tribal troop of Manasseh, Gamliel, son of Pedatsur. And in command of the tribal troop of Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gideoni. Then, as the rear guard of all the divisions, the standard of the division of Dan would set out, troop by troop. In command of its troop was Achiezer, son of Amishadai. In command of the tribal troop of Asher, Pagiel, son of Ochran. And in command of the tribal troop of Naphtali, Achirah, son of Enan. Such was the order of the march of the Israelites as they marched troop by troop. So the last 2 sets of tribes, the last 6 tribes were there in the back. 3 and then 3. The priests and the all the important parts of the tabernacle, those were sandwiched in at the front so that they could be protected, and the front tribe of Judah would be there. If they got attacked by the front, they would be the first ones to get hit. They would be the vanguard, and they would be able to protect everything else that was coming up behind. And so if they came up on the back, they had 2 sets of tribes that they had to get through in order to get to the tabernacle and all those precious things. So that you can see it's very well protected. The tabernacle is literally sitting in the middle between all tribes, and then even the parts of the tabernacle that were, the frame and all those other things are in the front. Those would be the things that would have gotten taken out if they were attacked from the front. So you can see it's a very careful, very well, really well maintained protection for the people. And again, it's the same thing today. If you're taking a dignitary, or if you're traveling with something precious, you keep it in the middle. You have a front car and you have a back car, and the middle cars are the cars where you have the important thing riding in that, whether it's the president or whether it's some treasure or whatever. That's where it is. You don't put it at the front, you don't put it at the back. Put it in the middle. And so that's why it is like this. It is unfortunate that you can take out the front, you can take out the back easier, but taking out the middle is a little bit harder. It's kind of crazy that people have to think about that even today, but it's not like our world is safer than it was back then. Anyways, I can't I mean, people have to think about this kind of stuff. So, all right. Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel the Midianite, Moses's father-in-law. Now, this is interesting because here it says that Moses's father-in-law was Hobab, son of Reuel. It says he's a Midianite. Other places he's been called Reuel. In other places he's been called, of course, Yitro. Here he's called Hobab. Now, how does he have all these different names? Again, the easy answer is it's written by a different author. The sources, the rabbinic tradition would not allow that to be a possibility. So they said he was known by different names. And what's interesting here is according to this, he's still with them a year later. Because when Reuel, Hobab, Yitro, whoever you want to say, whatever his name is, Moses' father-in-law, first reunited Moses with Tzipporah, which happened at Mount Sinai just before they get the Ten Commandments. We don't really know what happens to him after that reunification. But here it seems that he's still with the people. And here it says that Moses' father-in-law says, I will not go, he replied to him, but I will return to my native land. He said, please do not leave us, inasmuch as you know where we should camp in the wilderness and can be our guide. So if you come with us, we will extend to you the same bounty that Adonai grants us. And so Moses says to his father-in-law, look, you're one of these nomads. You're one of these desert people. You're a Midianite. You know where we're supposed to go, and you can help us. Now, of course, Moses has the best helper of all. He has God, but he still seems to think that Reuel, Hobab, Yitro, his father-in-law, dad, can help him. And it's very nice what he says to him, which is stay with us, help us, and I'll make sure that you are also part of all the blessings we have. You're going to have them. And it says that they marched from the mountain of Adonai a distance of 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant traveled in front of them on that 3 days journey to seek out a resting place for them. And Adonai's cloud kept above them day by day as they moved on from camp. So they go 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant, it says traveled in front of them, but of course, doesn't mean that it was the front. We know where it was. It's towards the front, but it's not at the front. But
Next line is in the Torah service.
that's the line. That's right. As Sheldon just said. And it says, Vayehi bin soah Haaron vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha, ve'anusu misanecha mipaneh. Then we say, Ki mitzion. That part's not in there. The Ki mitzion part is from Isaiah and also the prophet Micah. From Zion will come forth the Torah. It's one of my favorite lines. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. But this part, Vayehi bin soah, when the ark was set out, Moses would say, advance, O Adonai, may your enemies be scattered, and may your foes flee before you. And when it halted, he would say, Uvanucha, Yomar Shuva. And when it halted, and this is also traditionally part of the service, and when it halted, he would say, return, O Adonai, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands. You are our strength, God. You are like our power. So we say when we open up the ark, Vayehi bin soah Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, when the ark was set out, Moses would say, advance, O Adonai. Well, that's interesting because we really don't think about the battle cry that we're saying when we open up the ark, but that's what we're saying. We're literally asking God to defeat our enemies when we open up the ark. It's not, hey, God, give us lots of blessings. Protect us. Well, I guess it is kind of protect us, but it's protecting us by making our enemies disappear. Make our enemies disappear, God. So it's interesting that that was the line that we used. And again, it gets to this idea of what we're actually doing oftentimes in Jewish ritual, which is protecting ourselves and asking God to protect us, rather than just asking for good things to happen. We're in some cases specifically asking for God to destroy those who would try to destroy us. As we talked about before, this is the Shvo Chamacha. This is the line that we say when we open up the door for Elijah, we're also supposed to ask God to destroy our enemies. Pour out your wrath against those who would try to destroy us. That we mentioned in the Tuesday class recently. It's part of the tradition of what we're supposed to say when we open up the door. Nowadays, we usually just sing Eliyahu Hanavi. But as I pointed out a couple of weeks ago, it also is traditionally said, Shvo Chamacha, pour out your wrath against your enemies. This, of course, reflects times when Jews were not quite as powerful as we are today, as secure as we are today. who knows? We might be getting to a point where we start saying this a little bit more. And have to go back to that kind of mindset of worried about those who are going to destroy us. But for a lot of Jewish history, again, we don't know how old this is it as an institution. But again, when we open up the ark, we call it the ark, we call it the Aron, and we recognize that there's a connection between the Ark of the Covenant and the ark that the Torah is in. And I think that's probably the key here, which is that we want to recognize that the ark that we have the Torah in, to us, is like the Ark of the Covenant. And so the connection is the ark. But again, it reflects the fact that there is this idea that the ark protected us, that it had God's power on it. And, whether you had to open it like they did in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they blew up all the Nazis at the end, the fact is that it has a power that we recognize that would take us into battle. And as we read it for those who were on our Tuesday class, we read about this specifically in several times in the historical books. We know that in the time of after King David brought the ark into Jerusalem, the idea was it would be safe there. But before that, we know that the Jews did take it into battle. The Israelites took it into battle with King Saul. It got captured, and that was not good. It had to be returned. The Philistines returned it because they were getting hit with plagues. It was taken into battle by in other times where there was a real question of whether they're putting it in danger. And again, when the Egyptians captured the ark, the idea of the fact that it might have wound up in Egypt is the basis for the Raiders of the Lost Ark legends, building on those legends that it was already gone. By the time the Babylonians came and looted the temple, it was already gone. We don't know. We don't know for a fact, but the idea that it has power definitely is laid by this. And so it's interesting because, as I said, every week in Numbers, we've been reading a section that is actually part of our service. Priestly benediction that we read last week, Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. This week we're reading this. So it's interesting how the lines from Numbers make their way into the Siddur, make their way into our prayer book. It's very interesting that these prayers are part of our service, and these words become part of it. Now, we're going to read a little bit more, and I promise you that next week, when we have class, we're going to read another blessing that's one of my favorites. That's and Mary knows what it is. It's in chapter 12, but we're going to read about it next week. We're going to read another blessing. So as I said, every week we've been kind of coming up against a blessing that's in the Torah that's made its way into the Siddur, that's made its way into our liturgy and into our weekly or again, in some cases, our daily liturgy. It's kind of cool. All right, so let's look at chapter 11. This chapter is, unfortunately, I will say, reflective of what I will tell you right now is what we're going to see a lot of in this, unfortunately, as part of our journey through Numbers, which is why we call it discovery and dispute in the wilderness. This is a lot of the dispute. The people took to complaining bitterly before Adonai. Adonai heard and was incensed. A fire of Adonai broke out against them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. The people cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to Adonai, and the fire died down. The place was named Tavera. And if you look at it, why? Because the root, Beor, means to burn, like we had Bior Chametz, when we burn our chametz, our stuff, our chametz stuff. That's the word for fire, Tavera. The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. And then the Israelites wept and said, if only we had meat to eat. Now, this translation of the riffraff is from this word, asaf suf, asaf suf. What does the King James have for asaf suf, Mary, for verse 4? The mixed multitude. Mixed multitude is a literal translation of the word asaf suf, which means kind of the people who are gathered together, hanging on, the hangers on. What is Glory? Do you have a translation in your Bible for asaf for verse 4? You have one in there? I don't know. Oh, they're not there now. Sorry. The idea here is that this is a mixed multitude. These are people who are, well, the English translation we have here, riffraff, is the onomatopoeia. It's the sound kind of a grumbling group. So it's a good translation. But in Hebrew, the asaf suf are the people who, according to some translations or traditions, I would say, the mixed multitude, for example, has this idea that it's not Israelites, or at least not full Israelites. They are the mixed multitude, meaning they are not fully Israelite, that there may be mixed Egyptian Israelite peoples, which to some extent leads to some fairly racist conclusions about who these people are, which is these are people that they were going to be a problem anyways. And again, it seems like they're not Israelite from the standpoint of the riffraff are in their midst, meaning they're not part of the group. They're people who are like, they're in the group, but they're not of the group. And of course, here's the problem. If only we had meat. And it doesn't end there. We remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our gullets are shriveled. There is nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to. And so that was their problem. We want to remember Egypt. Remember Egypt? Remember the fish? So they go back and they think about the good foods that they had back in Egypt. And they're wistfully remembering not the fact that they were slaves, but that they had stuff that they liked, food that they liked. And so they said, we only have manna. And here's what it says about the manna. We've read about it before. The manna, we read about it back in Exodus. The manna was like coriander seed, and in color it was like bdellium, which is an interesting idea that it looks like coriander seed or some kind of seed, but it looks like bdellium, which means it has this kind of shiny color to it that, that the people, it says, well, the people would go about and gather it and grind it between millstones or pound it in a mortar, boil it in a pot and make it into cakes. It tasted like rich cream, which is cream of oil or fat. So it sounds like it tastes pretty good. It sounds like good food to eat. And it seems as though, at least from here, that the people could gather it, make it together. It says, when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall upon it. Now, here it seems like the manna ate the dew or fed on the dew, and then they were taken by the people, which seems to imply that maybe it's some kind of insect or bug, because it seems to be falling on the dew, meaning, drinking the dew, and that's how they got it, by collecting it up. Before, it seems like it's maybe more of a spore or some kind of thing that grew at night when they would pick it up. Whatever it is, people would gather it and they would make it, and they lived on it. They had been living on it now for over a year. But the people here were not happy with it. They were not happy with just having the manna. When Moses heard the people weeping, every clan apart at the entrance of each tent, Adonai was very angry, and Moses was distressed. God was angry, Moses was distressed. But it says Moses was also, mad. Could be. What does your translation, Mary, say?
Lord was, the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses was
displeased. Yeah. Distress sounds like he wasn't that angry. He was just worried. The Torah's word for it, ra, is the word for angry or bad, was not good. It wasn't just, it was bad. I want to say Moses was bad, but Moses was mad. And Moses said to Adonai, why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not enjoyed your favor? That you have laid the burden of all this people upon me. Did I produce all these people? Did I engender them? That you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a caregiver carries an infant to the land that you have promised on oath to their father? Where am I to get meat for all these people when they whine before me and say, give us meat to eat? So he says to God, I didn't give birth to these people. They're not my people. Why did you do this to me, God? I can't do this. And it says that you promised them this freedom. You promised them this land. I can't do anything. What are they going to do? What am I going to do? You put me in a bad situation, God. So it seems like he's a little mad at God, right? He says, I cannot carry all this people by myself, for it is too much for me. If you would deal thus with me, kill me, rather. I beg you, let me see no more of my wretchedness. Which it seems to be, again, he's so frustrated, he's so angry, he's so sad, that he says, I'd rather die than have to continue to do that. And he says to God, kill me. Yeah, but here he's saying, kill me. He just says, kill me. He says, I'm not going to kill myself. You kill me, God. And Adonai said to Moses, gather for me 70 elders of Israel's elders, of whom you have experience as elders and officers of the people, and bring them to the tent of meeting and let them take their place there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will draw upon the spirit that is in you, and I'll put it on them. They shall share the burden of the people with you, and you shall not bear it alone. And so God's answer here isn't, let me figure out how to get them food, but how am I going to make you, Moses, be able to do your job? And so God says to Moses, I'm going to split up your responsibility. Say to the people, purify yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have kept whining before Adonai and saying, if only we had meat to eat. Indeed, we were all better off in Egypt. Adonai will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall eat not one day, not two, not even 5 days or 10 or 20, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and it becomes loathsome to you. For you have rejected Adonai, who is among you, by whining before God and saying, oh, why did we ever leave Egypt? Wow. But Moses said, the people who are with me number 6,000, 100,000 foot soldiers. Yet you say I will give them enough meat to eat for a whole month. And so God tells Moses, I'm going to give them the food. They're going to eat it and they're going to get sick. I'm going to give them so much, they're going to get sick of it. And Moses says, but wait, God, how can you do that? There's 600,000 men here. How are you going to give it for everybody? So Moses questions God too. Moses says, can you really do that, God? Could enough flocks and herds be slaughtered to suffice them? Or could all the fish of the sea be gathered for them to suffice them? And Adonai answered Moses, is there a limit to Adonai's power? You shall soon see whether what I have said happens to you or not. And Moses went out and reported the words of Adonai to the people. He gathered 70 of the people's elders and stationed them around the tent. So Moses seems to doubt whether God can do it, but he follows through. He does exactly what God says. Then after coming down in a cloud and speaking to him, Adonai drew upon the spirit that was on him and put it on 70 participating elders. And when the spirit rested upon them, they spoke in ecstasy, but did not continue. And again, you can see the word here, prophesied, right? They spoke like prophets. They used that root for navi. They were speaking. Two of the participants, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, had remained in the camp, yet the Spirit rested upon them. They were among those recorded, but they had not gone to the tent. And they spoke in ecstasy of the camp. An assistant ran out and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are acting like prophets in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' attendant from his youth, spoke up and said, my Lord Moses, restrain them. So these two guys, Eldad and Medad, start prophesying. They start getting the power too, and they weren't even in the group. And they run over to Moses, right? Joshua says to Moses, you can't let these people do this. They haven't even been given the power. And they're doing it. You got to stop them. And look what Moses says. But Moses said to him, are you wrought up on my account? Would all Adonai's people be prophets, that Adonai put the divine spirit upon them? And that's a very powerful and famous line. What does your King James say, Mary? That-
Moses said unto him, envious thou from thyself.
Yeah.
Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets?
Yeah.
That the Lord would put his spirit upon them.
All the people be prophets. That's what Moses says. I don't care. You don't have to be jealous for me. You don't have to be jealous for me, Joshua. Let everybody be a prophet. And that's an interesting idea, that Moses is not trying to hoard. He's not trying to hog up all the prophecy. He says, let everybody be prophet. I don't care. Don't be jealous. And Moses then re-entered the camp together with the elders of Israel. And the wind from Adonai started up and swept the quail. This is the Slavim, the Slav. A day's journey on this side and about a day's journey on that side, all around the camp. And some 2 cubits deep on the ground. That's about 3 feet deep of quail. The people set to gathering the quail all day and night and all the next day. Even the one who gathered the least had 10 homers, and they spread them all around the camp. So that's like 25 pounds, 30 pounds of quail, even for the person who had the least amount. Now, quail, by the way, are really stupid birds. You can almost go up to them and pick them up. They're that dumb. They're that flightless too, to some extent. And so they're, of course, they're our California bird, but they are very easy to catch. So is it possible that they had a lot of quail? Very possible, especially when God blew them. It says God blew them together, right? God blew them over all together. But it says the meat was still between their teeth, not yet chewed, when the anger of Adonai blazed forth against the people, and Adonai struck the people with a very severe plague. And the place was called Kibrot Hata'ava, because the people who had the craving were buried there. And that is the craving, graves of craving. Kivrot are graves, and then Ta'ava is craving. Then the people set out from Kibrot Hata'ava, from Hatzerot. And then they were in Hatzerot. And then it says, and Miriam spoke out, we're not going to continue there. But there is a recognition here that this is not a great place to necessarily break, because the next stage of their journey, they're going to be in Hatzerot, which is where we're going to pick it up next week. We will be in person next week on Wednesday. Yes. So I told people on Tuesdays, I'm going to be missing some sessions in person, but we're going to do them online for the Tuesday. So it doesn't matter. If you're not here on Tuesdays, then it's not going to be a problem. But Wednesdays, we're going to be in person every week until the end of May, in which case there's going to be one day on the 24th that we're going to only be online. But we're not missing any sessions. We're just going to do some, we're going to do one session online on May 24th. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week, and we're going to pick up on the stories. Now there's going to be stories like the story we just read of people messing up. But they're mainly messing up though, Mike. The problem is they're mainly messing up. You do? I'm sorry. Well, anyways, have a great rest of the end of Passover. Chag Sameach, because technically it's a holiday. It's a time of rejoicing and a time of having good things and good blessings. So we'll see everybody next
Thanks,
week.
Rabbi.
Take care. And Friday in person, we're doing services with Wendy this Friday. Take care, everybody. Bye. Everybody.